Hi everyone, my name's Anthony Satorio. I'm a technical solutions executive at Autodesk, and today I'll be talking about building low-code solutions with Autodesk Platform Services and AI. Now, my background is originally in construction, so I'm not an expert at all of our APIs. I'm definitely not an AI expert, but I am passionate about technology. And I want to show some things that I've been exploring in a time of really massive change. And hopefully you can take away some ideas and understanding of what's now possible. So I like to think of the process of developing a software program in three stages. We have a problem, we look at it and think of the possibilities, the inspiration of how we could solve it, and then that gets turned into an actual program. And we can align those different stages with different personas. From my perspective, those people are coming from construction. So at the problem stage, we have our delivery teams, the people that really live and breathe the construction project and get their hands dirty in those problems. We have the people that are a little bit more technical. I call them the innovators, maybe the engineers, BIM managers are usually these kinds of people. They can see solutions, ways to solve those problems, but their role is not writing code. And then we have developers, which are often third parties or resources within companies that are dedicated to projects. Now, big changes have been happening in how that process comes together. And low-code tools and AI are reshaping really how building a program, building software actually works. And that's going to affect all three of those stages of this development cycle. Firstly, for delivery teams, AI is just opening up new kinds of problems that couldn't be solved before, but now can. For the innovators in the middle, they would have previously really struggled to turn an idea into a program. Low code and AI are really lowering that barrier to entry and making that possible, bringing a whole group of new people that could never program and create solutions before and giving them that capability. And for developers, look, low code is also a great way to proof of concept, to create things quickly and iterate. And that's what they're going to really benefit from. Also, they're going to have a big responsibility of having the knowledge of how the governance with all these new people being able to code needs to work. Now, I well and truly sit in the middle bucket. I'm not from a programming background. I do love to tinker though. This is me just over 1 year into construction, as you say, getting my hands dirty. Now, when I got to Autodesk, I thought that I'm in a tech company. I should understand Autodesk Platform Services. I should understand the technical side. But I really found it difficult to get started with developing, with actually learning. And it wasn't until I really made a different approach and started to look at low-code tools, to look at how AI could assist me in doing that, that's when I started to make some progress. And really that kind of approach is what I want to talk about today. So to break that down of how it really felt for me and how that can work for those innovators, when somebody from a non-technical background tries to create a program, there's a knowledge gap that creates this barrier to entry. They just don't have those skills needed and probably don't have the time to learn them. What AI and low code do is, firstly, low code lowers the amount of expertise. It makes it simpler to create programs. And with that lower knowledge gap, AI can also help us to bridge it by helping to learn. It's an excellent tutorial tool to pick up new skills. And this is what I'm going to show in a few different examples. Now, what I'll be looking at is three distinct types of solutions. Firstly, out-of-the-box agents. This could be things like your Microsoft Copilot. It's pre-configured, but there is some level of customizability. And there's other solutions that can do similar things to Copilot. Low-code tools, which if you're familiar with systems like Power Automate, use more of a visual programming environment to be able to do the same kind of work that coding usually would. And assisted coding, so using AI to actually help write the code itself. But when we're considering AI in these solutions, it is tempting just to rush in and start, letting AI loose and using that to create something. But there is still some principles and some helpful ways of thinking that will guide and make this more effective. So I could really summarize this as, don't just use AI. It's not the solution to everything. It may be tempting to try and interrogate all of our different types of data with it, but there are cases where traditional tools, where traditional kinds of automation are really important and can really complement what we're doing with AI in a program. And also check how that is being deployed, what kind of form, what kind of checking of what the AI is doing is important as well. So still going through all that kind of consideration of what a program needs to look like. Okay, let's take a look at an example of an off-the-shelf agent. So when I was back in construction, one job I had was to take the hundreds of reinforcement dockets that we received every month and to enter that information into spreadsheets. Now, this would take hours, so I decided to try and automate it. That took me months. I came up with a script. It could get the job done, but if I was to take that to a different project with a slightly different docket form, it would have to be completely rewritten. It was not scalable. It was quite fragile. And it took so much time to produce as well. If I compare that to what's possible today, here I've set up a custom GPT in ChatGPT. It's basically allowing it to have some custom instructions and the ability to call APIs, so external systems, and interact with them. In this case, ACC acts as the central repository for that information, where it can then be linked to other kinds of data. Really, this is a prototype. We've got to think about things like security and scalability, but the technology is there. And it really does show how much simpler to create something like this, which was probably a day's worth of work to work it out the first time, and very, very easy to copy. So I'm going to take a look now at that setup in ChatGPT. All right, so this is the custom GPT, and I'm going to go in and edit so you can see what's actually happening under the hood. Okay, so really pretty simple. I could run through a creator and ChatGPT will guide me as to what I need to input and will set it up for me. The output of that is some instructions which are getting built into the GPT. In this case, I'm telling it what to expect, and I'm giving it some structure for how it needs to use the data that it sees on that docket and how it will interact with the API, which comes from Autodesk. And I'm giving it some very direct instructions for some of the kinds of errors that it was coming up with. Now, GPTs, like I said, can interact with APIs. In this case, I'm interacting with the Autodesk Construction Cloud APIs. Now, that gets that information, or the way to interact with that is inputted to the GPT through an open API schema. Now, Autodesk Construction Cloud, our team have developed some of these open schemas for the APIs. So it is possible to take them effectively off the shelf, put them in here, and then get interacting and creating with those APIs. The authentication is also taken care of here. And you can see I've got a create form action and then the update form action. So the GPT is able to call both of those independently in the right order. And this is really all I've told it. It has no further instructions or really how to interact with them. It can work that out from this information that it's been given. So really powerful, really quickly customizable. And also with certain plans of ChatGPT, that data that gets sent stays private as well. So there is a way to do that too. But then if we want a greater level of customizability, low-code tools do provide a way of getting a lot more functionality similar to traditional programming, but with the very intuitive interfaces that don't require coding. Now, Autodesk solution in this space is ACC Connect. It's effectively a white label version of Workado, which is a integration as a service platform. And this comes pre-configured with the connectors for ACC, meaning that you just need to set variables using, again, the visual interface. It makes it way simpler to interact with those APIs. A lot of the time when I'm testing something out, even if it's not intended to be used in ACC Connect, I'll start in ACC Connect because it's so simple and so intuitive. And it does have many other actions out of the box that we can interact with. So you can see there things like OneDrive, things like Google Drive, things like Salesforce. And we can connect up to those systems and we can automate between them. So let's look again at the problem stage. In this case, quite a common occurrence. We get to the end of a project and the commercial manager is assessing variations. Now, throughout the course of the project, people have all raised different kinds of information, different data has been created, issues on site, emails, RFIs, and the job of the commercial manager is to pull that information together so that they can correctly assess a variation. Now, we can relate items on ACC, but when there's a huge volume of data, it can get out of control. So the process ends up being quite manual. Now, here I've set it up so that when a new change order is created, it triggers the process using ACC Connect to search across the project. And what I'm aiming for is to find the RFIs and the issues that are related to, could be related to, that change order that was just created. So what I'm aiming for is not just to provide the kind of summarization that AI would usually complete, but to actually automate off the back of it and complete an entire workflow that, again, would otherwise have to be done manually. So let me show you behind the scenes of what is going on in ACC Connect. I've created this recipe in ACC Connect, which is, in this case, going to find and create relationships. I'll go in and edit so we can see a bit more detail. So visual programming interface, very intuitive, and I can click on, in this case, the trigger which starts the recipe. And you can see these drop downs, which are going to be how I configure that action to take place. So I've selected that I want a cost object when that has been created or updated in the project, and then I can work with the variables to do with that as well. So that will trigger my recipe to start. I'm going to also look at the description out of that piece of information that's being created, and I'm going to check that if it contains this find related tag. So I'm not going to do it for every single change order, just for those that I want to. So I've got a level of control there. I'm using the information from the change order itself, which is this description, and I can drag and drop and use the information from parts of this recipe as variables. So if I scroll down a bit, I'll do a bit of information management and setting up some variables. I'm then going to search the project for issues in ACC. Again, I've got a connection set up here to ACC. It's got my authentication. It can interact with the APIs. And I've set up the project. I'm going to look for certain kinds of issues. From there, once I have all of those issues, I'm going to interact with the OpenAI APIs. Like I said, there's plenty of pre-built connectors, including for a lot of the AI systems. And in this case, I've taken the information I had and turned it into a prompt for ChatGPT. So I've got the name, which is the change order, the description, and I'm going to ask ChatGPT to return that information in a certain format. And then I'm giving it the list of all of the issues which I've just found. I go further down from there, ChatGPT is going to return me the issues that are relevant to the change order that was created. And then I can use another call to the ACC APIs to create relationships between the pieces of information. So in this case, the original change order and the issue that ChatGPT has deemed to be related to it. Now, as you saw in the video, there's a step there where I can review because I can see what has been added as a related item. But this gives me a great first pass at finding all of those items, which would otherwise take a whole lot of time. And as I say, ACC Connect is very customizable, is very quick to set up and create recipes like this. This is just one simple example of a whole range of things that you can do with it. Okay, let's look at another example. So in this case, we've got a site manager and they have an area that they're responsible for. Now, communication happens all across the project, but not everyone is aware of everything that's happening. So it's not like they can call up one person and get the whole picture. Typically, they've got to call up a lot of different people, maybe using messages as well, to try and find out, say, if there's changes to design, or if there's issues that have been raised, or there's information that hasn't been released yet for construction. So a really time-consuming and manual process. And often they're not familiar with digital tools. So how can we make that interaction with the project information more intuitive? In this case, I'm using something that a site manager would be typically very familiar with, WhatsApp, and feeding that through a different open source low-code tool called N8N. This is like Ocado, works in a similar kind of way, but it's specifically built around AI. And I'll show some of the functionality there. Here, the project data can also be better conditioned because I'm using a database called Pinecone, which enables RAG or graph database to interact with it in a different way. So I would like to show you what is happening in N8N. Let's take a look. So again, visual programming interface, it is similar to ACC Connect, but a little bit more dynamic in how we can lay it out and connect between different nodes, a little bit less linear in the way this works. And you'll notice straight away there's this AI agent node, which is really where a lot of the interesting stuff happens. But to start with, I'm triggering this recipe when the bot receives a message through WhatsApp, doing a couple of steps to work with the data, the message that is received. And effectively, if that is a photo that's being received, it's going to take this path, and that photo is going to get sent to OpenAI. And I provided a brief description here of what I want it to do. So give me back a description of what's in the image. From there, I'm going to feed that information along with whatever message was received in WhatsApp to this AI agent. You can see straight away that it's got a few different actions that are coming off of it. So one is the OpenAI model. Put really simply, this is the brains behind this AI agent. Every time it's doing something, it's going to call OpenAI through its APIs and use that knowledge and use that understanding to work out how to react to whatever's coming in. I've also got a memory bank here, so I can remember previous messages in this conversation. And I'm connected up to these two vector databases. So Pinecone for RFIs and for issues. Now, I've actually set up those databases using N8N as well. I'm not going to show that here, but that was using the embeddings through OpenAI. Now, if I look at the agent itself, it's got a system message to tell it how to work, how to react. And I can see the tools that it's connected to. If I go to the issues tool, it's got a description here of how the AI should use this. So I don't have to explicitly program every single step that happens. The AI is going to be more dynamic in choosing how to interact with the information at different points. And then the output is sending that back through WhatsApp as the response to the user. So as I say, for someone who's not familiar with interacting with a system, say like ACC or another project data system, bringing the information to them through the systems that they're familiar with and that they know how to use can be a really great way of getting that in front of them and making their lives easier. Okay, now you've probably noticed in a couple of instances, like in the ChatGPT, custom GPT, the prompt is in there to provide some instructions to how that AI needs to react. And there are some hints of how to get those responses to be more in line with what you're hoping for. So firstly, do look at the APS documentation. There is some really good information out there that Autodesk provides. And that's going to be important to understand what the APIs can and can't do. There's no point in trying to get AI to do something which just isn't possible. And we do want to give the AI as much of a leg up as possible. Like you saw in the N8N example, I'm using those vector databases to do some preconditioning of the data and basically giving it as much chance as possible when we get more and more information to still find the right information and give the right responses. I can almost guarantee that responses you get from AI will not be perfect the first time. So test, check with different kinds of scenarios, and refine, massage those prompts, get the data right to get the right responses, and iterate to add in functionality. Don't try and put in everything at once where it'll be difficult to really troubleshoot and work out what isn't working in some cases. So there's a couple of examples of low-code tools. They are by no means every low-code tool available, but hopefully they give a bit of an introduction to how you can start thinking of interacting with all different systems through them. Now, all of that advice that I just showed is especially relevant when using AI to help actually code. Because sometimes there are things that are just difficult or not possible to do with low code. There's plenty of content out there around vibe coding. So I'm really going to focus on how this relates to Autodesk Platform Services. And look, the first thing to say is if you have tried coding with AI before, it's definitely not a silver bullet. There is usually a lot of work in iteration. I've been through personally many hours of trying to debug. And for somebody without a great level of programming experience, that can be really difficult. So trying to do this in somewhat of a logical way. Like I said, going through some of those steps that I brought up previously can help to get rid of some of that heartbreak, but do expect that it's not going to be perfect. AI will continue to improve, so I've got great positivity of where this will trend. But as I say, solutions on one hit can be very difficult. Now, specifically on assisted coding, some of the things that will help to get better results here, start with example code. Again, Autodesk Platform Services has some really good documentation and also examples which you can build upon and look at that latest documentation, which is not always going to be obvious to an AI, which if there's been a recent change. Define what you're actually trying to solve, the problem. This may not mean a super detailed prompt going to the AI, but do understand what your data looks like. And again, try and give it as much guidance of how that needs to be manipulated and what it expects to see in the data. And iterate, debug with different models I found can be really helpful because they can give different responses. And just have a conversation and understand the explanations that the AI is giving, because the real opportunity that I see with vibe coding is actually to start to pick up some of the coding experience and learn as you're going. If the outcome or the aim is just to produce a piece of code at the end, then you're not nearly going to get as much benefit as you could by having this really powerful coding assistant helping you to learn in a real problem that you're trying to solve. Okay, so another example, which again needs to stray outside the low code side to solve. On the projects, we have all different kinds of people who need information to come from our models. And a lot of the time, they're not equipped to self-serve and create that themselves. They'll go to somebody like a quantity surveyor to, or maybe a BIM manager, to look into the model and find that information. So in this case, it might be the volume of concrete, the area of certain rooms, the building height. And each time somebody needs to recreate that information and go through and work with and manipulate the model. So as I said earlier, Autodesk provides a huge range of code samples, including for the viewer. Now, although in this case, I've had to do some custom programming to get the result, I've used that viewer code off the shelf, which is hosted on CodePen, to provide the starting point and actually the deployment as well, which I'll show shortly. Again, I'm using the OpenAI APIs to call on that AI capability, interact and use that with the data that's coming from the model. And you might have seen there in a couple of these, in some of these parts of the clip, where I'm actually doing some work on looking at if there's properties that are missing in elements in the model. And I think it's really important to try and, where possible, augment some of the traditional capabilities that we have with coding with the AI kind of capabilities. And you'll see in some of the code how that's happening. Okay, let me open that up. Firstly, let's take a look at the base that I started with. So this is some code that Autodesk hosts up on CodePen. You can also see it on the Autodesk Platform Services website. There's a bunch of these interactive examples. And in this case, I can see that there's all this base code which works to basically load the viewer. And I can go in here and I can search for certain kinds of elements and it will bring up a result. So I've used that as a good starting point. And then over many iterations with AI, I've been able to come up with another program. So that looks like this. I won't run through all of the code. This example is hosted up on CodePen under myself. I've got the link at the back of this deck. So do feel free to jump in there and take a look afterwards. But I will just take a look at the prompts. So Again have given some instructions to the AI to work out how to use this data. It's being sent the categories from the model, which I'm using traditional kind of methods within the viewer to extract. It's also being sent all the different levels, and it's got a query which is being entered by the user. From that, it's going to work out, am I going to filter, or am I going to need to calculate something that the user is asking for? And it's going to provide back to the viewer the right filters, which will be used to manipulate and filter down the model. So by category, by level, and you could imagine that I could build this out to have other kinds of properties that we can work with here as well. Really, again, the limit is as AI improves and how we can deal with larger and larger contexts. Maybe a bit of pre-processing, like I've said before, could help to make that a bit more efficient too. So the result of that is I can enter into here. Let's go into the volume of walls, which I did in the video, I think. And that's spoken to OpenAI. It's brought back the relevant element IDs from the list of IDs that were sent to the model. And in this case, it's filtered those out. I can also see that all of these curtain wall elements don't have a volume, which in this case is actually what I'd expect. The glazing probably doesn't have a volume assigned to it. But yeah, really quickly, I've been able to get a volume from those walls, and maybe I could then filter that down further by the grade of concrete or the type of material that those walls are made of. But effectively, the takeaway there is a fairly powerful AI tool, which I would want to work on more to get it to be deployed into an organization. But I've got that proof of concept of what I'd like to achieve out pretty quickly using the existing examples and using the assistance of AI to help me learn a bit and build this. And Autodesk are working on bringing these kinds of capabilities into our products through Autodesk Assistant. So for example, in the future with Autodesk Assistant, you might be able to query and ask something like, show me the information about the models that exist in ACC. Similar queries to what I was just doing with that viewer example. So Autodesk Assistant is the single interface that we'll have for interacting and with AI experiences. So yeah, expect to see more work and more features that get released there in the future. So I'd like to leave you with a couple of takeaways, really a combination of what I've seen work well and what I would be doing if I was in the industry still. Firstly, data is key. I mentioned that in many different examples here, how it gets used. And look, having a data strategy is really important to having an AI strategy. Getting control of your data, understand what it is, and understand how you can start to use it. Empower the innovators that exist in your organization to learn, to develop, to solve problems. They understand some of the challenges, but they have potential that may not have been released yet. And do that with the right guardrails. And then finally, gain the knowledge and the understanding and work out what the opportunities are by working with the technology providers that you have. Look, Autodesk may be one, but there's many others out there that you can gain that knowledge and really accelerate your journey towards building and solving your own problems. And all of these are not really specific to AI. They are meta skills for organizations. The rate of change with technology is so fast now that having a solid foundation and for a technology strategy to adapt off and to use some of these techniques which allow you to adapt and to build really quickly, that's really key. So I hope that you can take away that and start trying and experimenting and building in your own organizations. last thing I'll leave you with is just some resources. Feel free to go through these in your own time. And these are some of the things that have been able to help me get started. So both from Autodesk and then from all of those third-party tools, which are really interesting and helpful to experiment and get building with. So happy building and all the best with your low-code journey.